Hello everyone, in this video we will be talking about class method as well as static method, and we will see why do we need these two methods when we already had an instance method available. So we have this class defined over here, and won't be discussing this one first. I'll be discussing two pain points first, right? One is about what if our user data comes from JSON string or database dictionary directly. So what would we have to do? We will have to parse it manually outside the class every single time, right? So this is an example. User JSON is something like this: username Ahmad, email ahmad@hasab.tech, and you can see this entire thing is an string itself. So we are going to be using JSON dot loads to load the data into data variable, and then we will be using user to inefficient user like this to create an object. What would this do? It would pass username over here and email over here, and then it will create an object itself. So we can do it very quickly just to demonstrate over here. Let me just run the code like this. You can see that I'm over here now, and you can see user JSON. We have user JSON as a string, right? And then we have data. The data is properly passed over here. We have data.username and data.email of length 2, right? Properly in a dictionary format. Now what we will do is data username, data email, we will pass it to this particular class so that it will help us create an object, right? So if I go inside over here, you can see that now I'm inside init. So whenever we tend to create an object from a class, you know that init function is executed directly, right? It's called directly. So if I open self over here, you can see that self.username and self.email is assigned over here. And if I go down there, you can see that the user object is created. Now if I want to create more than one user, I'll have to do this repetitive code again and again and again and again. So this is a pain point, right? What if I forget to do one step and do another step, right? We need a certain sort of solution. To resolve this kind of problem, we have something called class method. Class method would do pre-processing. It would serve as a factory. If you are not aware of factory, you can consider it like something that help us create something, like something inside a factory, right? We are going to not going to dive deep into the concept of a factory. But generally you can say that we pass the data to the factory, and the factory does some pre-processing and create a object itself, so that we don't have to do this pre-processing again and again, something like that, right? So this is one problem that is solved by class method. Right now I will be going to pain point number 2. So in many ways, we are going to need utility functions. What are utility functions? You must have used them if you are obviously coming from a programming background in many use cases. For example, to check the length of a password, to create a password, to check the complexity of a password, to check whether a username is available or not. So businesses use all sort of utility functions to ease their processes down their programming world. So in order to use a method in instance, if we only have an instance method, we will always have to create an object to use that method. For example, I'll just show it to you. If I want to use this is valid email, which checks whether an email is valid or not just by @ obviously. So what would we do? We would have to first create a dummy object so that we can call dummy is valid email, right? But obviously this does not look like an optimized way. I just want to call a function directly without creating an object. Why do I need to create an object? This kind of a problem is solved by a static method. That is why static method is used. Static method generally does not care about the data available in a class or an instance. Normally it just takes some sort of input and provides some sort of output, which helps us basically in that particular class infrastructure. So these are the two pain points that I have discussed, and I will just show you how class method and static method help us resolve these problems. So now you can see that we have class user defined, and we have system name obviously out of it is not attached to self. So what is it? It is a class variable, right? And then we have self.username, self.email inside init. So what are these two? These are instance variables. And then we have this method, which is instance method. Whenever we have a self over here, you can consider it as a instance method, which does nothing but displays a profile, something like self.username, self.email, or user.systemname. You can see one difference over here. If I am let me just do it like this. So if I just want to access instance variable, I'll do self.username or self.email. If I want to access class variable, I'll do user.systemname. A very subtle difference. Now we will see how a class method is defined, right? So this is the most widely used example, because normally we get data from any API in form of JSON, and we just want to parse it and create an object out of it whenever we want to use it in our Python world, right? So You can see the example over here. This from JSON is being used as an alternative constructor, right? How this generally, this is our constructor, right? But we have a data which is not pre-processed, and we need to process it to call it to the instructor, and I'll just show you how. So we are getting this data, so I'll just show you the example first. This is the data that I'm getting, right? And how am I calling from JSON? I'm calling user, which is the name of the class itself, and from JSON, and I'm passing user data directly, no pre-processing outside of a class, right? Now what does this from JSON do? It loads the data and then it returns CLS username equals to data. You can see one more difference, right? Whenever I'm using @class method decorator, the first argument I would be passing as is CLS. So when I'm creating instance method, the convention is to use the word self, and whenever I am using a class method, the convention is to use first parameter as CLS, which is the class itself. Okay, so what I'll do right now, I have a debugger over here and we will see how it goes. Okay, I'll get to the static method later on. Okay, so moving forward over here, we are now on user data. So if I hit over here, we will see that user data is over here, which is something like username Shamil, and if I expand it forward, email shamil@hasab.tech, right? And what I will do is I'll just go into user.fromJSON. So user.fromJSON comes over here, which is data equal to json.loads, right? It will load the data, and you can see that our locals are now changed, and JSON string over here is this particular string. So, and let's check the class variables, and we have just main.user, right? This is CLS, right? So if I come over here, you can see that now we have data which is particularly loaded at the dictionary over here, and which has username and email both, right? So what happens when we return CLS and then we have this like this? So I'll just go a bit up over here just to demonstrate it to you. This is how generally we create an object, right? We use class name and then parentheses, and then we pass the data, right? And this is then passed directly to the init, right? And now let me show it to you like some parallels. What happens over here, this class here, you can see what is the class variable. Class variable is user itself, right? So if I do let's say, let me just write it down for clarity's sake. If I do user or something like this, this is what's exactly happening over here, right? Just to show you the clarity, this is what's exactly happening here. I'll remove this code over here, and then I'll just get inside over here like this. See, I'm now inside init. So what's happening is from JSON is actually behaving as a constructor, is doing pre-processing and then calling the init within itself. I don't have to call the init later on myself, it's doing the entire thing in itself, right? So if I do it like this and go ahead and then do this, you can see that user one is going to be created. See, normally you would call the class itself. Now we did not call user and then bracket and call the parameters. We just call the function, we just call this from JSON and then pass the entire string itself, and it does the entire thing by its own self. So this is where the actual usage in practical world comes when we prefer to use class method. Okay, and user1.display profile, what is it? Display profile is our this method. So if I run this and I showed the result to you over here, you can see it will just print the data, nothing else, right? And now so hopefully you are clear about what exactly is a class method, right? Now we will be moving forward. What exactly is a static method? It is exactly how we define a class method. We will be using @static method as a decorator, and unlike instance method where we use first parameter as self, or a class method where we use first parameter as class, static method does not require any such convention to be used, because it is just it just behaves as a normal function. So it requires nothing, no any data from instance or from a class itself, right? So it now serves as a utility function over here. So how do we call it? Exactly like a class method, user.fromJSON, user.isValid. That's it. That's how we have to call it, and it will just check the utility. So I hope this part is also clear to you, and I hope this entire video makes sense, and now you have a very much clarity how what is the difference between instance method, class method, and static method, and in which cases do we need to use each of them. Hopefully this makes sense. Thank you for watching.